The Grand Council Chamber of Nexus Prime was the largest meeting hall in the known galaxy. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Light came from 1,000 floating crystals that drifted slowly through the air like lazy fireflies. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned sections, each area designed to match their home world's atmosphere and gravity. Ambassador Daniel Carter stood at the human section and looked across the massive room. He was a tall man in his late 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 30 years as a diplomat, first on Earth and then among the stars. He had seen many things in his career. He had solved problems that others said could not be solved. But today, he felt something heavy sitting in his chest. Today was different. Beside him stood Commander Lisa Morgan, a woman in her early 40s with short brown hair and a military uniform. She carried a small data chip in her pocket. That chip contained everything. It contained the truth about what had happened in the Varus sector. It contained images that still made her wake up screaming in the middle of the night. The great bell rang 3 times, and the chamber fell silent. Councillor Vrexthal rose from his central platform. He was an insectoid creature, ancient and respected, with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the floating lights. He had served as Speaker of the Council for 300 years. In all that time, he had kept the peace. He had prevented wars. He had guided the galaxy through countless crises. This emergency session is now open, Vrexthal announced, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the chamber. We gather today to address the formal complaint submitted by the human delegation regarding recent events in the Varus sector. A ripple of whispers moved through the chamber. Daniel could feel the eyes of dozens of species turning toward him. Some looked curious. Others looked annoyed. A few looked amused. Humanity was still young in galactic terms. First contact had happened only 40 years ago. In that time, humans had joined the Council, established colonies, and tried their best to be good neighbors. But to many of the older species, humans were still children, emotional, impulsive, not yet worthy of serious attention. The human delegation may speak, Vrexthal said. Daniel stepped forward to the speaking platform. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Honored Counselor, he began, keeping his voice calm and steady. Distinguished representatives, I come before you today not to make accusations without proof. I come to present facts. I come to ask for justice. He paused and looked around the chamber. 3 weeks ago, we lost contact with our colonies in the Varus sector. New Haven, Shepherd's Rest, Morning Star, 3 worlds. Combined population of 847,000 people. The number hung in the air. 847,000. Families, children, teachers and doctors and farmers and dreamers. We sent ships to investigate, Daniel continued. What they found was beyond anything we could have imagined. Before he could continue, a harsh voice cut through the chamber. If I may, Counselor. Daniel turned to see the Kethvari delegation rising from their section. The Kethvari were tall reptilian creatures with scaled skin and cold yellow eyes. Their High Ambassador, Zornok, stepped forward with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned in his life. The human ambassador speaks of lost contact and missing colonies, Zoranek said smoothly. But let us be clear about what actually happened. The humans established settlements in territory that rightfully belongs to the Kethvari Dominion. When we moved to reclaim our space, the humans resisted. There was conflict. This is regrettable but understandable. Murmurs of agreement came from several sections of the chamber. Daniel felt his hands tighten into fists at his sides. The Kethvari delegation suggests this was a simple territorial dispute, Daniel said, forcing his voice to stay level. I respectfully disagree. What happened in the Varus sector was not a dispute. It was not a conflict. It was systematic murder. More whispers filled the chamber. The word murder was strong, perhaps too strong for diplomatic speech. Zoronek laughed, a cold hissing sound. The humans are emotional, as always. They exaggerate. They dramatize. This is their nature. Daniel looked at Lisa. She gave him a small nod and handed him the data chip. "Counselor Rexthel," Daniel said, "I request permission to present evidence to the full council." Rexthel's compound eyes studied Daniel for a long moment. Evidence of what nature? Visual recordings, sensor data, survivor testimony. Daniel held up the chip. "Everything we found in the Virus sector." "There are no survivors," Zornak said quickly. "How can there be testimony?" The chamber went quiet. Zornak realized his mistake a moment too late. His yellow eyes narrowed. "The Kethvari ambassador seems very certain that no one survived," Daniel said softly. "I wonder how he knows that." Rex Thal raised one of his forearms. "The council will review the human evidence. Ambassador Carter, you may present your materials at tomorrow's session." This meeting is adjourned until then. As the representatives began to leave their sections, Daniel remained standing on the platform. Lisa moved to his side. "They're not going to help us," she said quietly. "You saw their faces. They've already decided this doesn't concern them." Daniel watched the Kethvari delegation leaving. Zoronek glanced back at him with a confident smirk. "Maybe," Daniel said. "But tomorrow they'll see what we saw. They'll see the bodies in the streets of New Haven. They'll see the schools reduced to ash. They'll see what the Kethvari did to our children." His voice hardened. "And then they'll have to choose. Help us find justice, or stand aside while we find it ourselves." Lisa looked at him. "And if they stand aside?" Daniel Carter, career diplomat, man of peace, looked at the spot where Zoronak had stood. "Then God help the Kethvari, because humanity will not." The floating lights drifted slowly overhead as the chamber emptied. Tomorrow would bring the truth, and after the truth came the reckoning. The next day, the council chamber was full. Word had spread about the human evidence. Species that usually ignored emergency sessions had sent representatives. Even the observation galleries above were packed with journalists and curious onlookers from across the galaxy. Daniel Carter stood at the speaking platform and looked at the crowd. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the images from the data chip. He saw what the recovery teams had found on New Haven. "Council of Rexthale," he said, "with your permission, I will now present the evidence gathered by Admiral Patricia Cole and the Human Recovery Fleet." Rexthale nodded slowly. "You may proceed." Daniel inserted the data chip into the central projection system. The floating lights dimmed and a holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a beautiful planet with blue oceans and green continents. "This is New Haven," Daniel said. "Our largest colony in the Varus sector. Population, 203,000 people." The image shifted to show a city from above. Streets and buildings and parks. Schools with playgrounds. Hospitals with landing pads for emergency vehicles. Dr. Kevin Park was the colonial administrator, Daniel continued. "He was a good man. He moved to New Haven with his wife and 2 daughters because he believed in building something new. Something hopeful." The image changed again. This time, it showed the same city, but everything was different. The buildings were burning. The streets were filled with debris. And everywhere, there were bodies. A gasp moved through the chamber. "This is what Admiral Cole found when her fleet arrived," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the horror on the screen. "The Kethvari did not come to reclaim territory. They came to kill everyone." The hologram shifted to show sensor data. weapon signatures, ship movements, a fleet of Kethvari vessels surrounding the planet like predators around wounded prey. They jammed all communications first, Daniel explained. No distress signals could get out. Then they destroyed the orbital defense stations. And then, he paused. The next images were worse. Then they released biological weapons into the atmosphere. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Biological weapons were forbidden by galactic law. They had been banned for over 1,000 years. Zoranak rose from his seat. This is fabricated. The humans have created false evidence to turn the Council against us. The evidence has been verified by 3 independent species, Daniel said calmly. The Vizani Collective, the Morrow Alliance, the Free Traders Guild. All 3 confirmed that this data has not been altered. He looked directly at Zornak. Would you like me to show the Council what your weapons did to our children? Zornak said nothing. His yellow eyes burned with cold anger. Daniel continued the presentation. More images. More horror. The colony of Shepherd's Rest, where 18,000 farmers had built homes in fertile valleys. Morningstar, a mining settlement of 42,000 workers and their families. All gone. Every single person. When the presentation ended, the chamber was silent. Even the species who usually showed no emotion seemed affected by what they had seen. 847,000 human beings, Daniel said. Men, women, children, the elderly, the sick, none were spared. None were given the chance to surrender or evacuate. He looked around the chamber. We did not come to the Varus sector as invaders. We came with council approval. We followed every regulation. We established our colonies in zones designated for human expansion. And in return for our cooperation, for our good faith, the Kethvari murdered our people. Council of Rex still spoke, his ancient voice heavy. Ambassador Carter, the evidence you have presented is disturbing. The Council will need time to verify these claims and consider an appropriate response. What response do you consider appropriate for genocide? Daniel asked quietly. The word hung in the air like smoke. Zoranak stepped forward again. The Council must remember that the Kethvari Dominion is a major power in this region of space. We control vital trade routes. We provide security against pirates and raiders. Whatever mistakes may have been made in the Varus sector, it would be unwise to damage relations with the Dominion over this. 847,000 lives dismissed as this. A new voice spoke from the amphibian section of the chamber. Counselor Thiessen, an elderly creature with wet gray skin and wise eyes, rose slowly. I have studied humanity for many years, she said. I have read their history. I have learned their languages. I must tell this council something important. She looked at Daniel, then at Zornak. The Kethvari have made a terrible mistake. They looked at humans and saw a young species. A small fleet. A minor power. But they did not look deeper. They did not see what humans become when you harm their children. Zornak laughed. They become angry? They shout and make threats? We are not afraid of human anger. Thiessen shook her head slowly. You should be. The session continued for several more hours. Delegates argued. Evidence was discussed. Motions were proposed and debated. Through it all, Daniel waited. He knew what was coming. He had seen the private conversations. He had counted the votes. Finally, Rex Thill called for the official response. The Council will now vote on invoking collective defense protocols in support of humanity's request for joint action against the Kethvari Dominion. The votes came in. 31 against. 16 in favor. The Council had spoken. There would be no help. No justice. No action. Zor single quotes. NAK smiled his cold smile. It seems the galaxy has decided. Perhaps the humans should learn to accept their place in the natural order. Daniel looked at the voting results displayed in the air. Then he looked at Commander Lisa Morgan. She gave him a single nod. "Council of Rexthil," Daniel said, "I request permission to make one final statement before the session closes." Rexthil hesitated, then nodded. "You may speak." Daniel Carter straightened his shoulders. For 30 years, he had been a diplomat, a man of words and compromise. But some things could not be solved with words. Some things required a different kind of answer. The chamber waited. 47 species watched as the human ambassador stood alone on the speaking platform. The vote had failed. Justice had been denied. Everyone expected anger. They expected demands. They expected the emotional outburst that younger species always showed when they did not get their way. But Daniel Carter did not shout. He did not demand. Instead, he began to speak in a quiet voice that somehow reached every corner of the massive room. "When humanity first reached the stars," he said, "we were filled with wonder. We had spent thousands of years looking up at the night sky and dreaming. And then, 40 years ago, we finally joined the galactic community. We met species who had been traveling between worlds while we were still learning to use fire." He paused and looked around the chamber. "We were humbled. We knew we were young. We knew we had much to learn. So we tried to be good students, good neighbors, good citizens of this great galactic civilization." Several representatives nodded. The humans had indeed been cooperative. Perhaps too eager to please at times, but generally well-behaved. "We shared our medical research freely," Daniel continued. "Our work on genetic diseases has helped 6 different species. We sent emergency aid when the Dasani homeworld suffered earthquakes. We offered favorable trade agreements to developing worlds. We asked for nothing in return except friendship and the chance to grow." He looked at the section where the Kethvari sat. Zoranak was still smiling his cold smile. "We followed every rule, every protocol, every law. When we wanted to establish colonies, we applied through proper channels. We accepted the zones assigned to us. We did everything right." His voice grew harder. "And in return, 847,000 of our people were murdered. Not soldiers, not warriors. Families, teachers, doctors, children who never hurt anyone." Captain Ryan Mitchell sat in the observation gallery above. He was a young man with haunted eyes. He had been commanding a patrol ship near the Varus sector when the attacks happened. His ship had arrived too late to help, but early enough to see the aftermath. Daniel gestured toward him. Captain Mitchell was one of the first to reach New Haven after the attacks. He is asked to share his testimony with the council. Rexthil nodded. "The captain may speak." Ryan Mitchell stood on shaking legs. His voice came through the speaker system, rough with emotion. "We found him in the streets," he said. "The biological weapons the Kethvari used. They didn't kill quickly. People had tried to run. Parents had tried to protect their children." He stopped, struggling to continue. "I found a school. The teachers had gathered all the students in the main hall. They must have thought they would be safe there. They must have thought someone would come to help." His voice broke. No one came. By the time we arrived, they had been dead for 3 days. 200 children. The oldest was 12 years old. The chamber was completely silent. Even species that usually showed no emotion seemed affected. Ryan Mitchell sat down heavily. His testimony finished. Daniel spoke again. "Captain Mitchell will carry those memories for the rest of his life, as will every member of the recovery fleet, as will every human who has seen the evidence of what happened." He turned to face the central platform where Council of Rexthil sat. "We came to this council seeking justice. We asked you to invoke collective defense. We asked you to stand with us against those who murdered our innocent people." His voice grew colder. "And you voted no." The number hung in the air again. 31 against. 16 in favor. 31 species decided that justice for human lives was not worth the trouble. 31 species decided that trade, roots, and political relationships mattered. More than 847,000 dead. Several ambassadors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Holographic screen flickered to life behind Daniel. On it appeared a woman in her 60s with silver hair and steel-gray eyes. Secretary General Nicole Webb, the political leader of Earth and all human colonies. "Council of Rexthil," she said. "On behalf of Earth and humanity, I formally requested that the Council invoke collective defense protocols. The Council has refused." She paused. "We accept this decision. We understand that the Council must consider many factors. We understand that we are a young species with limited political influence." Zornak's smile grew wider. He sensed victory. "However," Nicole Webb continued, "we must inform the Council that humanity cannot and will not allow the murder of our citizens to go unanswered. We sought justice through proper channels. We were denied. Now we must seek justice through our own means." The chamber stirred with uncertain whispers. Councilor Thiessen rose again. "I warned this council yesterday. I warned you that humans are not like other species. Their history is filled with terrible wars, yes, but also with terrible determination. When humans believe they are fighting for something just, they do not stop. They do not surrender. They do not forgive." She looked at Zornak. "You laughed at them yesterday. You called them emotional and weak. But you have not studied them as I have. You do not understand what you have awakened." Zornak waved dismissively. "They are one species with a small fleet. We outnumber them 15 to 1. What can they possibly do?" Daniel Carter smiled. It was not a warm smile. "You are about to find out." The chamber fell silent again. Something had changed. The diplomatic mask that Daniel had worn for 30 years was slipping. Behind it was something older. Something that humans had carried with them since the first days on Earth. Something that their neighbors in the vase galaxy had never seen before. Daniel looked at the Council one final time. "I have one more statement to make. And after I make it, humanity's relationship with this council will never be the same." He straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath. "I speak now with the full authority of Earth and all human territories. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on him. What I am about to say will be recorded in galactic history. I want every species here to remember this moment. I want you to remember that we gave you a choice. We asked for your help. We begged for justice through peaceful means." His voice rose, filling the chamber, "and you refused." Daniel Carter stood perfectly still on the speaking platform. The floating lights of the council chamber drifted slowly overhead, casting soft shadows across his face. Every representative in the room was watching. Every recorder was active. History was about to be made. 40 years ago, Daniel began, we joined this community with hope in our hearts. We believed in the wisdom of the older species. We believed in the laws of the council. We believed that if we followed the rules and treated others with respect, we would be treated the same way. He shook his head slowly. We were naive. We see that now. This council does not protect the innocent. It protects the powerful. It protects trade routes and political alliances. It protects the comfort of species who have grown too tired or too afraid to fight for what is right. Several ambassadors made sounds of protest. But Daniel continued, when the Kethvari murdered our people, we came to you with evidence. We showed you the bodies of our children. We proved beyond any doubt that genocide had been committed against sovereign human territory. And what did you do? His voice grew harder. You voted 31-16 against helping us. 31 species looked at 847,000 dead humans and decided it was not their problem. 31 species told us that Kethvari trade routes were more important than human lives. Councillor Rexthiel spoke carefully. Ambassador Carter, the Council's decision was not a statement about the value of human life. It was a practical consideration of the consequences of military action. Practical? Daniel repeated. Yes, I suppose genocide becomes much easier to accept when you are being practical about it. The word genocide echoed through the chamber. Several representatives flinched. I want to address the Kethvari directly now, Daniel said, turning to face Zorinek. High Ambassador, you have smiled through these proceedings. You have laughed at human anger. You have mocked our grief. You believe you are safe because the Council has chosen to do nothing. Zorinek's yellow eyes glittered with amusement. The human finally speaks truth. You are alone. Your fleet is small. Your species is young. What can you possibly threaten us with? Daniel nodded slowly. A fair question. Let me answer it. He turned back to address the full chamber. Humanity has been at peace for 200 years. Since the last great wars on our homeworld, we have chosen to focus on exploration and growth rather than conflict. Many species have looked at this peace and assumed it meant we had forgotten how to fight, that we had become soft, weak. His smile was cold. They were wrong. He began to walk slowly across the platform as he spoke. Our peace was never weakness. It was a choice. Every generation of humans since the Great Wars has been taught the horrors of conflict. We chose peace because we had seen what war does to civilizations. We built hospitals instead of weapons factories. We trained doctors instead of soldiers. We reached for the stars instead of reaching for each other's throats. He stopped and faced Zorinek. But we never forgot. The knowledge is still there, passed down through generations. The weapons designs, the strategies, the will to fight when fighting becomes necessary. We simply chose not to use them. Zorinek's smile faded slightly. The Kethvari Dominion outnumbers our fleet 15-1, Daniel acknowledged. You have more ships, more weapons, more territory. By any practical measure, you are the stronger power. He leaned forward. But you have made a mistake that stronger powers have been making against humans for thousands of years. You measured our ships and counted our guns. You looked at charts and calculated numbers. And based on those numbers, you decided we were not a threat. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. But somehow, it filled the entire chamber. You never studied what humans become when we fight for our children. He straightened and spoke clearly. Therefore, by the authority granted to me by Secretary-General Nicole Webb and the United Earth Government, I hereby announce the following. The chamber went absolutely silent. The human species formally declares a state of total war against the Kethvari Dominion. This is not a police action. This is not a limited engagement. This is war without reservation until the Kethvari leadership answers for the genocide committed against human citizens in the Varus sector. Chaos erupted. Representatives shouted. Recorders flashed. Zorinek rose to his feet, his yellow eyes wide with shock. You cannot be serious, he hissed. This is madness. You will be destroyed. Daniel waited for the noise to die down. Then he spoke again. The Kethvari believe they know how this war will end. They look at their 15-1 advantage and see easy victory. But let me tell you how this war will actually end. He pointed at Zornak. It will end when the leaders who ordered the murder of our people face justice. It will end when those who planned and executed the genocide are held accountable. Not your common soldiers. Not your civilians. Just those responsible. He lowered his hand. Humanity is not coming to destroy the Kethvari people. We are not interested in revenge against the innocent. We are coming for justice against the guilty. And we will not stop until we have it. Counselor Thiessen spoke from her section. How long has humanity been preparing for this? Daniel looked at her. Since the day we learned what happened in the Varus sector. We hoped the council would help us find a peaceful resolution. We prepared in case they would not. Rex Thill spoke, his ancient voice heavy with concern. Ambassador Carter, no species has declared open war in over 800 years. The consequences of this action could destabilize the entire region. Daniel nodded. Yes, they could. Perhaps the council should have considered that before voting to allow genocide against human colonies. He turned to leave the platform. This session is concluded. Humanity thanks the council for its consideration. We will trouble you no further with our problems. He stopped at the edge of the platform and looked back one final time. To those species who voted to help us today, we will not forget your support. To those who voted against, we understand your decision, but understand this in return. His voice carried across the chamber like thunder. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you harm our children. Watch carefully, remember well, and pray you never give us reason to teach you the same lesson. Ambassador Daniel Carter walked out of the council chamber. Commander Lisa Morgan fell into step beside him. Behind them, the chamber dissolved into chaos. The first galactic war in 800 years had just been declared, and humanity was done asking for permission. News of the declaration spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, every species with access to communication networks knew what had happened in the council chamber. The young species called humanity had done the unthinkable. They had declared open war against a major galactic power. The reactions were mixed. On trading stations throughout the Outer Rim, gamblers placed bets on how long humanity would last. Most gave them 3 months at best. The Kethvari fleet was simply too large, too powerful. The humans were brave, everyone agreed. Brave and foolish. On the homeworld of the Zani Collective, Counselor Thiessen sat alone in her study and watched the recording of Daniel Carter's speech for the 5th time. She had tried to warn the council. She had spent decades studying humanity, learning their languages, reading their history. And she knew something that the Kethvari did not understand. Humans were most dangerous when they were fighting for something they believed in. She thought about Earth's history, the long centuries of conflict, the terrible weapons humans had created to destroy each other. And then, somehow, the peace that had lasted 200 years. Not because humans had become weak, because they had chosen to be better. But now that choice had been taken away from them. Now their children had been murdered. And the galaxy was about to see what humans look like when they stopped choosing peace. On Nexus Prime, Ambassador Daniel Carter walked through the docking bay toward his shuttle. Representatives from other species watched him pass. Some looked at him with pity, others with fear. A few nodded with quiet respect. Counselor Thiessen was waiting at his shuttle. I tried to warn them, she said. They would not listen. Daniel stopped and looked at the elderly amphibian. I know. I read your reports on human history. They were very thorough. Too thorough, perhaps. Cezanne's wet gray skin glistened under the station lights. I described your wars in great detail. Your weapons. Your strategies. But I do not think they understood what I was really trying to say. What were you trying to say? Thiessen looked at him with ancient, wise eyes. That humans do not fight like other species. When most species go to war, they seek advantage, territory, resources. They calculate costs and benefits. They withdraw when the price becomes too high. She shook her head slowly. But humans fighting for their children do not calculate. They do not withdraw. They become something else entirely, something that the Kethvari have never faced before. Daniel nodded. Thank you for trying, counselor. When this is over, humanity will remember who stood with us. He boarded his shuttle and departed far across the galaxy. In the heart of Kethvari space, High Ambassador Zornek stood in the command center of the Dominion's central military station. Around him, officers monitored sensor screens and communication channels. The humans are bluffing, Zornek announced confidently. They must be. Their fleet is nothing compared to ours. This declaration is a desperate attempt to gain sympathy from the Council. The military commander, a scarred veteran named Vethrak, studied the tactical displays with narrowed eyes. Perhaps, but we should not underestimate them. The humans have been quiet since joining the galactic community. We know very little about their true military capabilities. Zornak waved dismissively. We know enough. Their ships are small. Their weapons are outdated. They have no experience in galactic warfare. They have experience in warfare, Vethrak said quietly. Plenty of it. Just against each other. Before Zornak could respond, an alarm sounded. Officers scrambled to their stations. What is happening? Zornak demanded. A young officer looked up from his screen, his scales pale with shock. Sir, we are receiving reports from the border stations. Human ships have been detected in Dominion space. Already? That is impossible. The declaration was only hours ago. Even at maximum speed, human ships could not have reached our borders yet. The officer swallowed hard. Sir, the reports indicate that the human ships were already in position. They have been inside our space for weeks. The command center went silent. Vethrak moved to the tactical display. His eyes widened as he studied the data coming in from border stations. This is not a fleet, he said slowly. This is an invasion force. Carrier groups, strike squadrons, medical ships, and refugee transports. He looked at Zornak. They were planning this before the council vote. They knew we would be denied justice. More reports flooded in. Human ships appearing near supply lines. UN probes scanning military installations. Human communication signals that the Kethvari could not decode. How did they get past our border patrols? Zornek demanded. Vethrak shook his head. Unknown. But if they have been operating in our space for weeks without detection, he did not need to finish the sentence. If humans had been inside Kethvari space for that long without being noticed, they were far more capable than anyone had believed. On the bridge of the human carrier Resolute, Admiral Patricia Cole stood before a tactical display showing the entire Kethvari border region. Around her, officers worked with quiet efficiency. All strike groups report ready, Admiral. Her executive officer announced. Patricia Cole was a small woman with gray hair and calm brown eyes. She had spent her entire life preparing for a war she hoped would never come. Now that it had come, she felt only cold determination. Status of the evacuation corridors? She asked. Clear. Refugee ships are standing by to evacuate Kethvari civilians from combat zones. She nodded with satisfaction. This was not a war of extermination. Humanity was not interested in becoming the monsters they were fighting against. They were here for justice. Targeted. Precise. Deadly only to those who had earned death. A communication signal beeped. Patricia accepted the call. Ambassador Daniel Carter's face appeared on the screen. He was still aboard his shuttle, traveling from Nexus Prime. Admiral Cole, the declaration has been made. You may proceed. Patricia nodded. Understood, Ambassador. We are ready. Daniel paused. Patricia, make them answer for New Haven. Make them answer for Shepherd's Rest. Make them answer for Morningstar. Make them answer for every child they murdered. Yes, sir. Her voice was steady. "They will answer." She cut the communication and turned to her bridge crew. "All ships, this is Admiral Cole. Humanity has been attacked. Our children have been murdered. The galaxy has refused to help us find justice. So we will find it ourselves." She took a deep breath. "Remember why we are here. Remember the names of the dead. Remember what the Kethvari took from us. And then show the galaxy what happens when you wake the sleeping giant." Across the border region, human ships began to move. Engines flared. Weapons charged. Thousands of men and women who had never wanted this war prepared to fight it anyway. Back on Nexus Prime, the council chamber remained in chaos. Species argued about what to do. Some called for intervention. Others demanded neutrality. None of them could agree. Council of Rex, though, watched the debates with heavy hearts. In his 300 years as Speaker, he had prevented countless conflicts. He had maintained peace through diplomacy and patience. But now, as he watched the sensor reports coming in from Kethvari space, he understood that some things could not be solved with words. The humans had asked for help. They had begged for justice through proper channels. And the Council had failed them. Now, the galaxy would watch as humanity showed them a different way to find justice, and Rex still suspected that the lesson would be remembered. For a very long time, in the void of space, human ships crossed into Kethvari territory. The first galactic war in 800 years had begun, and the sleeping giant was awake.